Welcome, welcome to another episode, Pound for Pound Boxing Report, episode 468. After a bit of a hiatus, we are back. I am your host, Michael. Usual cast of characters: Gail from NYFights.com, Daniel from 4 Boxing News, and the Inscriber. What's going on, lady and gent?
Oh, we're all back just in time to cover hot boxing summer.
Ooh,
Thank
yeah.
goodness, because 2025 boxing has been just mid AF to say the least. Uh, for those who are new to Pound for Pound Box Report, Pound for Pound Box Report YouTube show, um, live YouTube show. Pretty much at this point, uh, for those who wish to email us, you can do so. P4pboxing at p4pboxingreport.com. If you check the description below, if you're checking us out on YouTube, either live or on tape delay, you'll see all the spaces where you can find Pound for Pound Boxing Report on the YouTube channel, on Facebook, on IG, and for the time being on Tumblr. If you wish to donate, uh, let donation be the best nation. Got a Cash Me and PayPal donation link. I would prefer if you wish to donate, wouldn't matter to us if it's $1, $2, $5, whatever you want to spare, to use the PayPal option, because Cash Me you can only donate so much. They changed their policy towards the latter half of 2024. Um, let's get going. Recapping what was an eventful weekend, both in and out of the ring. Right. Um, let's start with in Japan, Tokyo to be specific. And usually back to the format. Ladies first, as always. One of the best fighters, in my opinion, in all of boxing is reigning unified 118-pound champion Junto Nakatani Gale. He returned to the ring in what was a unification bout against countryman and fellow bantamweight champion Ryosuke Nishida. Uh, Excellent fight which Nishida had to retire, heading as his cornerwood led him out into the seventh round due to severe swelling over his right eye. Turned out that Nishida was also dealing with issues with his right shoulder. The thing about this performance, about this overall fight, Gail, is that lately Nakatani has had to basically chase his opponents down, walk and walk and chop them down. But in this instance, Nishida uh, went right towards Nakatani, stepped to Junto and said, "Let's dance, let's go to war." And it's rare that we see Nakatani be put in a position that he has to display boxing skills. He made the adjustment and he began to use the jab. He began to create distance with that punch, and he put on pretty much a display of power boxing. Um, Starting roughly second, third round, he began to connect. Uh, Nishida's eye began to swell. Replays showed it was more of a headbutt than it was an actual punch. But Nakatani showed why he's amongst the very best. And in the aftermath, he basically said to Naoya Inoue, who was in attendance, "Don't go nowhere because I'm coming." And from all indications, uh, if this is not his last fight at 118 pounds, it may be he's moving up to 122 pounds in the not too distant future.
Yeah, it's a shame that a lot of Nakatani's fights, fly under the radar because of the time difference in him performing in Japan, fighting on a Sunday when people have got other things to do. But if you are within the sound of our voices and you haven't seen this fight, you need to go back to ESPN or to YouTube and find it and watch. Nakatani needs to be on every pound for pound list if he's not there already. And he's been creeping up toward the the entry ranks of pound for pound lists. He is a phenomenal performer. He will make anyone who thinks that the lower weight divisions aren't all that exciting change their minds. And he is so skilled. He does everything well. He's a come forward fighter. He's exciting. He doesn't have particularly, one hitter quitter knockout power, but that doesn't matter because he's bringing the action until he makes his opponents yield, and that's exactly what happened with Nishida. And credit to his young challenger, he was brave, he went for it, he went right at Nakatani, and honestly, that's about the only thing you could do because if you don't find him, he's going to find you anyway. And he did his best. He did tag Nakatani several times. If he'd had any more power himself, Nakatani might have been in trouble, but he wasn't. By the end of the fight, where Nishida's corner had to stop it, he was a hot mess. He had an eye completely closed by Nakatani's left hands, who were just pounding him the whole fight. And hopefully he learned a few things standing in with the master. And he can say that he went some rounds with him. Someday he'll be telling his grandchildren that he was in the ring with Nakatani. What I also really like is this partnership. Is this very unusual trainer partnership. Nakatani trains basically full time in Los Angeles, which y'all can discuss this amongst yourselves, but I'm a firm believer that LA still has the best sparring in the world. And Nakatani is kept busy, and he's in a classic Mexican gym in LA with Rudy Hernandez, the older brother of the late Genaro Hernandez. And it's one of those trainer fighter partnerships that's just a perfect fit. It's like Manny Pacquiao and Freddie Roach, right? And those two are making magic. Everybody else in the gym is better for it. That's where Anthony Olasquaga, El Princesa, also trains with Hernandez and is a sparring partner at times with Nakatani. And it's just been a magic recipe. It's phenomenal when you see that kind of talent and opportunity and all the right support come together. So now we're all rubbing our hands, waiting for that fight with Inoue. But Nakatani's still got business down at 118. He's not in a huge hurry. He can still make the weight with no problem. But I think that sometime in 2026, we'll get that fight. And it will need to take place then primarily because Inoue is starting to reach the end of his career. And when he was here in the United States fighting in Las Vegas, he said that he thinks he's probably got about 2 years left on his career. So we know that the clock is ticking. And the fight between Nakatani and Inoue, two of Japan's all-time boxing superstars, honestly, that is the Japanese Hagler Hearns. And I cannot wait.
Early indications, Daniel, that um, we will see if all things go well and both men continue to win. We will see Nakatani square off against Inoue at 122 in the spring of next year, right? But to Gail's point, both men have work to do. Inoue, of course, has an upcoming bout in September against Akhmadaliev in Saudi Arabia, I believe. And uh, word broke within this past week that Nakatani has caught the interest of Turkey Al Sheikh, who has an interest in having Nakatani fight on the Canelo uh, Terence Bud Crawford undercard, which undercard we will talk about. We will give an update on Canelo and Crawford um, in a little bit, but sticking to Nakatani, I know what the plan is, right? But for me, I think from 18 to 26, that Nakatani is the biggest threat to Inoue. Uh, dare I say, Daniel, a fight between those two would be the most significant fight in Japanese boxing history. Uh, Not just one of the biggest fights in all of boxing. Uh, uh, I wish we could get it now. The
Yes.
sooner the better.
If it was up to me, I would have that fight be the co-main for Canelo Crawford. But
That fight deserves to be in Japan, though, Daniel. It deserves to
but
be in
that
Japan.
that's one of the points I have. That fight, as much as I would love it to have it there, it doesn't need to be in Las Vegas. It needs to be in the Tokyo Dome. It needs to be in the Yokohama Arena. Those are the places that you can fill up a stadium and it will rock. Because the way Inoue fights almost blends perfectly with the way Nakatani fights, particularly when Nakatani is not afraid to stand inside and trade. But I also understand that they do like the Japanese do, as much as we praise them for the fighting spirit, they do like to marinate some fights recently. And this is one of the fights where I'm okay with let it marinate until the beginning of next year. You either end the year, this is either a New Year's Eve fight, barring any injury to either fighter for the remainder of the year, or this has to be before March or April 2026. Because at a certain point, unfortunately, as much people would like to marinate fights, it gets to a point now, especially at this age, where the impatience will grow thin. And like Gail mentioned, Inoue has put his career on the clock. And the longer this fight goes, the longer he can feed the perception that maybe he may be ducking Nakatani. I don't think he is, but Inoue is smart enough to know that he still currently holds most of the cards in negotiations.
I don't think he is either, but I agree with Gail that if we saw Inoue's last fight, right, in which he got knocked down, if you watch the previous, if you watch this fight against Luis Neri, in which he got knocked down, rally on both occasions, dare I say, the monster, what he's in his early 30s now, maybe showing some signs of age. Um, he doesn't fight on his toes like we saw down at 18, at 15, at 108, or even the masterful performance that he put on against Stephen Fulton 2 years ago, right? Uh, so he's looking a little bit vulnerable. And if Nakatani could, now with his power and whatnot, sure, I've seen Nakatani hurt, right? But we also, if put it this way, if Neri could hurt in a way, so can Nakatani, right? Um, if
Ramon Cardenas hurt him.
Ramon Cardenas was able
His
to
verdict
catch,
popped him. I was
right,
there, and it was a
yeah,
stunner. And he's very fortunate that that punch came very near the end of a round.
right, and if Cardenas was able to catch in a way uh, at an alarming rate, dare I say, if Nakatani was able to catch it in a way in that way, in that manner, uh, not only would Nakatani win, Nakatani has a good chance of stopping him. Either way, it's a sensational fight on paper, given the form of both men, less keep our fingers crossed that it
And I
happens.
mean, wouldn't it be great if it happened here? But it deserves to be in Japan. It deserves to be in front of those fans. Unfortunately, although the crowd was incredibly enthusiastic in Las Vegas, loved the fight, it saved the weekend. That was a disaster weekend, as we all recall. There were only 9,000 people in the seats. In Japan, they will fill any arena they put it in. They could put
Oh,
it
Tokyo Dome, 50,000. There's no other venue.
55. There is. They could put it in Saitama, which seats 64,000. And they could even put it in Nissan Stadium in Yokohama, which is
You're
in the
right.
town, which fits 72,000, and it would be packed.
Yep.
Yeah, that's Japan's national stadium. Yeah, it's got to be there. So, folks, start making your plans. Get your passport up to date. If you're really, really serious, you're going to need to make that trip to Japan. And who wouldn't love that if you've got the opportunity?
Let's move on to from a dominant champion at 118 pounds to a dominant champion at 200 pounds, Daniel Najai Opetaia. He fought this around the same time as Nakatani and Nishida in Australia, defending the belts against an Italian guy. Put this guy Nakatani Opetaia's opponent in the same category. At Bob Hope cousin. He was no hope. We knew that going in. And Opetaia did what he did, dominant before stopping him, I believe in round 6 it was. No, it could be round 6. The question is, afterwards, Opetaia called for a fight, a unification battle against Zurdo Ramirez. Now, there's a perception in these boxing streets that Golden Boy wants to hold off that kind of fight for as long as possible. There's some who believe that Golden Boy will never let that fight happen. What say you?
Well, there's been a lot of fights in the history of Golden Boy that we said they would hardly never let happen, yet it has. One of those fights was Canelo versus Arizona Lara. They made it happen because the players wanted it to happen. And in this case, I think Zurdo has found an actual footing in the cruiserweight division. He doesn't feel like he has to cut the weight that he had to us when he was a 168 or 175. Is a bit more comfortable there. And he still has the height. He still has a reach. And he still has a pretty decent chin. Now, that will be tested because we have to remember, Opetaia, the way he won this fight is, I think he literally broke the guy's jaw. You see like a straight flush hand. Lance, he goes down, doesn't bother to get up. So that's the power that Zurdo has to deal with, but he's not afraid. That's one other thing when it comes to Zurdo. He is not afraid to put himself in a position where skills-wise you would side against him. Like Richard, he took on that fight with Dimitri Bivol without hesitation. So to me, a fight with him, Opetaia, would be without hesitation. Now, the only question that you have that has to factor into is whether the IBF and WBA, because I believe WBA is the belt that Zurdo has, that has to be the situation that has to be sorted out. Because if we know one thing, always when it comes to the sanctioning bodies, one of them is going to get in the other's way. Whether it's the IBF actually enforcing their mandatories, which I do believe, I think this one was either voluntary or mandatory, or the WBA trying to suck out as much of the sanctioning fees as they can. But this fight should happen. And I think Zerto will imply and pressure Oscar and Bernard to make it happen.
Let's go from the well, no. I was going to say something. Let me take that back. Also, hours before Gail, you had Nakatani and Opetaia fighting basically in and around the same time. Young Abdullah Mason, right? Up and coming lightweight, ranked number 2 by the BO. Circumstances, and we will talk about this later, forced him to be Mason to be the main event as he fought Jeremiah Nakathila, just like Nakatani, and for the most part, and Opetaia was dominant. So was Abdullah Mason against Nakathila, who looked a little bit long in the tooth, right? Uh, Mason wants a fight with number 1 contender, WBO contenders Sam Noakes, which we now know could be for the WBO lightweight title. The question I want to put on the table, and I asked y'all privately a few days ago, your thoughts on Mason. Is he a future champion? How does he compare to fellow lightweight on the top ranked stable, Raymond Moratala, who was recently upgraded to IBF 135-pound champion with the retirement of Vasyl Lomachenko?
So Murataya, who just fought to win the interim title and has now been elevated after the retirement and relinquishing of the IBF belt by the full holder, Vasyl Lomachenko. Murataya is a kind of a fighter who does everything well, isn't particularly flashy, but is just very put together. He goes about his business very practically. You know, he's kind of the guy who packs his lunch, goes to work, does his thing, gets the job done, moves on to the next project. Does he inspire wild fan adulation? You know, he is a favorite in Southern California, where he's from, but not all that well known. I would say he's one of the more anonymous champions out there. On the other side of the street, you've got Mason, who is a phenom, who is potentially the future face of American boxing, especially when his stablemate and family decided to implode and sabotage themselves last weekend. And that could be a whole show discussion by itself. But Mason is incredibly mature for his age. He's, still 20, I think, 20, 21 years old. He's got a very solid family around him. His brothers are all athletes. They aren't all boxers, but they've all participated in some form of combat sports, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, that kind of thing, wrestling. Father is the trainer. They're tight. Their camps are very disciplined. And Mason is smart enough among the current young generation of boxers not to get drawn in by the beefs, the social media nonsense. He keeps, he's smart enough to keep his opinions to himself. He speaks only for himself. He did not allow himself to get drawn in commenting on what had happened over the weekend in Norfolk. He talked about what he did, what he's looking to do. He did get into it a little bit earlier in the fight week when he called out Keyshawn, but at this point, I think he's moved on from that. Now, the Noakes fight, very makeable, nice unification fight. Noakes is a Queensberry Promotions fighter that could easily be put onto a Riyadh undercard, and I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. Mason was asked, will you go to Saudi Arabia? Yep, no problem. He will go wherever is designated. On the other hand, do I think Mason's capable of fighting Noakes and winning? I do. But he's very young. I'm not even sure he's got his full man strength. And he is like you just mentioned about Nakatani. He's not a one hitter quitter type of puncher. He's an attrition type puncher. That's exactly how he beat down Nakathila, who just took damage round after round. He also started having an eye close up. His face was a mess, and he'd lost every minute of every round. So it was smart for their corner to pull him out. But I don't know that we need to rush Mason onto the big stage so early, but he is very ambitious. Top Rank badly needs American stars. They really do. They're not going to put him up against Murataia anytime soon. When they don't have to and cannibalize their stable. But I do think they might let him go after Noakes if he and his father and the team really think that he's ready. I mean, he has certainly earned the opportunity to try. A lot was put on his young shoulders this last weekend, and he performed admirably, not just in the ring where we all knew what he could do, but he handled all the problems swirling around him like a pro. He really did, and I was very impressed. I was more impressed by that than I was his performance in the ring, which was damn good.
Has a certain maturity, uh, Gail, that belies his age because he's only like what, 20, 21. Um, Top Rank has high hope for him, and they're looking to push him rather quickly. The fact that he was basically the code main, and they gave him the spot. They gave him he got the spotlight, and the way he presented himself, the way he carried himself during interviews, particularly after the fight, applauded. At least I saw throughout my timeline on multiple social media uh, platforms. You love his composure outside the ring. You love his talent and his potential inside the ring. And unless something changes, a title shot awaits him. I would say within the next 6 months to a year. Now, I mentioned that he was forced up to be the main event, and let's talk about it now. Go to you, Daniel. Then go and Gail. You can include yourself as well. Um, Mentioned how Mason got into a little dust up with Keyshawn Davis, the businessman who was supposed to main event this card that took place on ESPN in Davis's hometown, home arena of the Scope. Right, he was supposed to fight. Davis was supposed to fight Edwin De Los Santos, but he was stripped of the WBO 135-pound belt because he didn't just miss the skip. He just didn't miss weight. He badly missed weight, 4.5 pounds overweight. Right, didn't even attempt to try to make weight on a subsequent follow of weigh-in. And ringside, in the aftermath of his brother losing, surprising loss to Nate Albright, right? Uh, Keon, I believe it was, who lost Daniel. Cameras showing Keyshawn and his brother Kelvin getting into an altercation with the camp of Albright. If there was a big loser or the biggest loser of the week this past week, it was definitely Keyshawn Davis. Sir, what are you doing? What are you doing? First of all, you were unprofessional and not tending to your weight, and then you were unprofessional the night uh, of the event. A bad look, Daniel. A completely bad look.
It is rare to see this type of implosion in your hometown, but we saw it happen here. First, it was the weight. Like I say, he missed it by an entire division almost, which it sounded like maybe he didn't really take training camp seriously. Maybe he's a little bit too big for his own good, his head, or maybe, yeah, his body was developing to a point where making lightweight was no longer an option. Either way, it was a bad look when you're defending the title in your hometown. Now, they did try to renegotiate their way with the De Los Santos camp, but De Los Santos' camp luckily did the smart thing and chose to move on rather than take an extra payday facing a fighter that was gonna be already too big as it was. And then this whole situation made Albright. Oh, Jesus Christ. It's bad enough, okay, for your family. Okay, your little brother lost a fight, a very, very close fight. But he did lose the fight. And then after that, to go and to have an altercation back in the dressing room, which followed up with Albright going to an interview, letting the people know, yeah, I got jumped by the Davis family. And then the video came out. This is Keyshawn Davis, unfortunately, was one of we were talking about now with Dilla Mason, one of the American potential stars that Top Rank was banking on. But unfortunately, over the past year, he has shown certain tendencies. And this was a full-blown implosion. If you were thinking that Top Rank was going to back him up, no. They will sacrifice him in whatever fight they seem fit, and they'll probably dump him as soon as they can, because there's a crash out, and then there's whatever this was.
To Daniel's point, Gail, it was a couple of years ago in which Keyshawn was suspended for testing positive for marijuana, right? It seemed that he had straightened himself out and uh, uh, um, straightened up and flown right, excuse me, and went on to win a world title. The momentum that was built from that annihilation of Baranchik to win the belt just a few months ago, he's destroyed all of that basically in a 48, well, yeah, 36 hours span. And it got to this point now where there's no other way, as far as I'm seeing, as both a fine and a suspension, and a lengthy suspension at that. And falling from grace, my goodness, would not be surprised because of how he embarrassed himself and how he embarrassed the brand that is Top Rank, Gail. That Top Rank, uh, he could be on the chopping block when it comes to Top Rank. I'll just say that.
His timing could not be worse. I mean, this blew up in the worst possible way. Now let's go back. First of all, like a lot of fighters, Keyshawn and his family come from a challenged background, very rough, um, not grown up in the best of circumstances. The reason the older brother is out there in the ring at this age with such a minimal record is because he spent quite a bit of time in prison. Wouldn't be the first boxer to do that and get out, restart his career. Keyshawn seemed to manage to thread the needle and is one of those fighters blessed with obvious talent. And he did what he needed to do, rose up through the ranks. Now, remember, 2 years ago, he had a fairly significant stumble after a fight in Texas against Nahir Albright. Yes, the same Nahir Albright who was on the undercard fighting his brother. That's when Davis got popped for marijuana. Not a performance-enhancing drug, but illegal according to the Texas Commission. And he was suspended and the fight was ruled a no contest. You need to know the rules if you're going to do stuff like that, which you shouldn't be anyway if you're an athlete. But he learned a lesson from it, so it seemed. It looked like in the last 12 months in particular that those knucklehead days were over. He was soaring, and Top Rank gave him every support he could have asked for, everything he needed to succeed, have promoted the hell out of him. It was a good partnership, and they staged this homecoming fight for him. They had prearranged for the mayor of Norfolk to give him the key to the city after he won his fight. Except, for some reason, Davis, in his arrogance, decided not to even make any attempt to make weight at all. When you come in that far over, first of all, a week or two out, you're not going to make it. And a responsible fighter and his team who were in that situation, assuming that, unlike Keyshawn, they had actually been trying to make weight and knew they weren't going to make it, you contact the opponent and his team and say, listen, here's the thing. Can we figure out a deal ahead of time to let the fight go on? And they negotiate. And when there's enough warning, usually they can figure something out. Keyshawn said nothing to nobody, got into it with Mason at the pre-fight news conference a few days prior, and then gets on the scale and bang, he's way over, way over. Most of the time, the challenger, the so-called B-side fighter, needs the fight, spent the money on camp. It was a biggest ever paycheck for Edwin de los Santos. And you assume that he's going to take a chunk out of Keyshawn's hide, get paid, and go through with the fight. But in this case, thanks to his manager, Samson Lukowitz, they decided to walk away because it was too dangerous. And one thing that Samson was aware of that apparently Keyshawn and his team didn't recognize is that, according to the Virginia State Commission, if the fighter doesn't make weight, the other fighter gets his purse anyway, whether the fight happens or not. So De Los Santos was going to get paid no matter what. And I'm trying to recall what the payday was. But, a decent payday, especially when you don't have to actually get in the ring. Now, De Los Santos had also killed himself to make weight. He looked pretty dried out, pretty skeletal on the scale, but he made it. Davis didn't. So he was already in deep shit with Top Rank, with everybody involved who'd made such a big damn deal of his homecoming. He'd sold a lot of tickets. Top Rank saw fit to offer the fans a refund. And of the 10,000 tickets sold, 2,000 people asked for their money back. So there's that. And then Keyshawn has the nerve to sit ringside watching the fight, the rest of the card. And if any of you happen to see him, he's sitting there ringside and he's wearing this big blingy necklace that says businessman. Well, Keyshawn, you didn't take care of your business one damn bit. That has some nerve doing that. That was not a good look. Very arrogant. He was in no position to be doing that. All right. So older brother wins his fight, and younger brother, I don't know if that he was, I believe he was the co-main. So the younger brother, so to date undefeated, faces Albright, Davis's former challenger in Texas, and Albright beats his brother. And good for him. He put on a great fight. Albright, for the last couple of years since he fought Davis, has been competing in TCL, Team Combat League fights. And say what you will, there are people who don't think a lot of that Team Combat League format or system, but it keeps the guy very busy. He had 2 competitions in April. He was sharp, he was ready to go, and it paid off. So add to the whole DB3 pain, one of the other brothers loses. So 2 out of the 3 fights didn't go the way they thought they were going to go. And apparently, what started the dust up is the two dressing rooms for the Davis crew and the Albrights were next to each other. And Keyshawn and and Calvin were in the dressing room next door, hearing Albright and his team celebrate. And I guess it riled them up, and that's when the whole thing started. They went next door to tell him to pipe down, and that's when the scuffle started, and it just went downhill from there. Keyshawn couldn't be a bigger contrast to his stablemate, Abdullah Mason, and it's just a shame that he has reverted to this behavior. But Keyshawn wouldn't be the first extremely talented athlete to have his demons get to him. What the hell he was thinking, not training to try to make weight. Could he not do it? Was he fooling himself? Was he just simply arrogant enough to lie to everybody else, knowing he was going to go up in weight? I was not aware that he had had trouble making 135 before. It didn't seem like it. So, it's just going to be one more talented athlete sabotaging himself, not making weight, not taking responsibility for it. That is a discipline problem. You need to make weight. That is your job. And it's really, in a lot of cases, the hardest part of their job. I get it. But when you sign up for this job, that's what you got to do. If you didn't do it, and then they made it worse by all of the, bad behavior after the fight. And, Albright now has a big ass bump on his forehead from being headbutted, apparently, by one of the brothers. And there have been suggestions he should sue them for assault. I don't think, he doesn't strike me as that kind of guy. There has been discussion about a rematch between Keyshawn and Albright, which would be very interesting. But I'm not sure Keyshawn deserves the opportunity. We'll see what happens.
No, he does not, based on his behavior, uh, leading up to his behavior and his lack of discipline, both before the fight and his immaturity before leading up to the weigh-in and the weigh-in itself, and his immaturity ringside. It was weak on his part, and his team going after Albright like that. Okay, your brother lost. Uh, Take it as a team, take it as a family. You learn from it, you move on, and you get better. What you don't do is get ticked off and do some punk stuff that he did there. Um, Again, suspension for me, fine. A fine will not do it, right? Because he could just make that up in one fight, given the purses that he's been making. He was set to make over $1 million. So this fight, he makes He's a six-figure fighter now. That didn't take much for him to make up for a fine. He needs to be put on his butt. Those kind of actions, there has to be consequences and repercussions. I'm sure you're going to see that from Top Rank, and there has to be a restoration process for Keyshawn. He has to look himself in the mirror and see what does he want when it comes to his career. Because this right here, it ain't the move, sir. It ain't the move. Let's move on to some other. Before we do that, Gail, I'm going back to you to cover this one fight. I omitted it during the fight recap, and excuse me right quick, I had technical issue on my hand. Fabio Wardley, right? Coming off of the um uh first round TKO win of a rival Frazier Clark in their rematch, right, late last year. Fought a guy by the name of Huni. A little bit more exciting than a lot of people thought heading in, but Wardley got the win. And let's just say, at the very least, in UK heavyweight circles, he's becoming a known quantity. And I think that may spread to across the pond, if you will, particularly for those who saw this fight. Wardley's beginning to make a bit of a name for himself.
He certainly is. There are a lot of rising stars in the heavyweight division in British boxing. And sometimes it's hard to tell what the talent level is when they're fighting mostly domestic opponents. But Wardley and his rival, Fraser Clark, the Olympian, had a phenomenal fight against each other earlier in 2024 that was fought to a draw. Really a good fight, crazy action fight. And a rematch was in the works. They did it at the end of the year. We thought we were going to get rounds 13 through 24 because it had been such a competitive fight. Wardley absolutely knocks Frazier the F out in the first round. Amazing result. So Wardley's stars on the rise, and he was originally scheduled to face big baby Jarrell Miller. So that fight was announced. Fun, typical Miller trash talking news conference. It was all set to go. But Miller pulled out, apparently due to a shoulder injury, if I recall, a month or two prior. And so the call was put out, and Australian heavyweight prospect Justice Hooney said, I'll take it. Good for him. He bet on himself and came over to England. This was set up as a big homecoming fight for Wardley in Ipswich, his hometown, in the big soccer stadium there, right? That's their dream fight. They all want to fight at their home soccer pitch. So Wardley and Hooney is set up. It was a very rainy day in Great Britain, but they managed to keep the canvas dry enough to get the fight going. And for as many rounds as the fight went through 8 rounds, Hooney was beating Wardley handily on the cards. He's mobile, he's powerful, he's more skilled, and he was tagging Wardley, who was hanging in there. It was a great fight. It was very entertaining, but it was fairly clear that absent somebody getting knocked down or knocked out, Hooney was going to cruise to a pretty solid decision victory, and it was making his decision to take the fight on a month's notice look pretty brilliant. Except it's heavyweights. One punch can change things, and thankfully for Wardley, that one punch was absolutely the best right hand on the button you were ever going to see, and he dropped Hooney like a bag of bricks to the canvas. Now, there's a little controversy about whether the referee's count was a bit speedy, but Hooney was out. I mean, he was trying to get up off his knees. He struggled. He did get to his feet. He was very wobbly. That fight was over. Really a fun fight. Again, just like the Nakatani fight, if you missed it, get over to YouTube and watch it, or at least watch the highlights, because the knockout was spectacular. Frank Warren, his promoter, said that Wardley is the new Deontay Wilder, that he's got that one punch eraser and he can be losing every round of a fight.
That's a little bit of exaggeration, but let him go off.
Good for Frank. He's a promoter. That's what they do, right? And it was kind of a fun
hyperbole, but again, let him go off and have his moment.
Oh yeah, let him. But Fabio Wardley is developing a pretty serious fan base there in Great Britain. He's a little older than you might think. He's 30, but some heavyweights do just mature a bit more slowly, and they can have a much longer career. So who really knows what the upside is? But he is the modern prototype heavyweight. He's 6'5". He is currently holding the WBA interim title. Obviously, this is all going to get sorted out when Usyk and Dubois have their rematch, and once someone unifies probably that, they're going to start needing to face mandatories, but the WBO mandatory is first for whoever wins. So Wardley's backwards in line. Who knows who they'll put him in the ring with next, but he's riding high. He started his career as a cruiserweight, but he's really developed nicely into a fun heavyweight to watch. And it might be that in his next fight, someone catches him or somebody manages to escape that one punch, and like Hooney beats him on the cards. But it'll be fun to watch whatever happens. He's entertaining. He's a good interview out of the ring. Seems to have his head on straight. Count me as a fan. I enjoyed that fight tremendously.
Yep, to your point, Gail, right hand, right down the middle, center ring, midway point through round 10. Put Hooney down. Hooney couldn't get up for the count, and we saw what and thrilling win, pulling victory from the jaws of defeat. Shout out to ABC Wild World of Sports. If you know, you know. Let's go back into the news segment, Daniel, and stay within the UK heavyweight scene. I get what Gail is saying about Fabio Wardley, but throughout that nation, when it comes to up and coming heavyweights, the most talked about up and coming heavyweight is Moses Atuma, right? 21 years old, Olympic medalist, and people over on the other side of the pond believe that Atuma is has the makings of a future world champion. They're also talking about him needing to step up the competition a little bit. What it looks like is going to happen, at least if you look on the surface, as Atuma is set to now fight Dillian White August 16th, I believe, in Saudi on a Riyadh season card. If you just look at the name, Daniel, um, Dillian White is a more than worthy step up opponent. But the problem, but the proverbial devil is in the details, right? Context is critical. And when you look at Dillian White in recent years, one, he hasn't fought much. Two, when you've seen him in the ring recently, he hasn't looked good. Uh, and he looks like he's a little bit long in the tooth. So is this a case of high profile name? But when it comes to the young Atuma, um, he looks to he if you look below the surface, uh, you wonder how much of a real quote unquote test this would be. Unmute your mic, Daniel. I think Daniel may have some technical issues. Could you pick that up, Gail?
Yes, there we go. Sorry about that. I mean, Wardley looks like he's got a lot of talent, but he can't hold a candle to Itama. If you've
No,
not
he
seen
can't.
Itama, go get your YouTube on, go look at some highlights. Moses Saitama, well, his last years, his most recent goals were to try to become the youngest heavyweight champion ever in history, breaking Mike Tyson's record. Well, he got too old to do that, and the belts are in other hands, so he was a little bit stalled, but that's how ambitious he is. And he is just so damn talented. People are taking him at his word. This is not hyperbole when we're looking at Moses Saitama. Big, young, he's 20, he's skilled, he has that same maturity that we see in a kid like Abdullah Mason. And, Tyson did do it. A lot of fighters were young champions 20, 30 years ago. We thought nothing of it. All Moses Itama lacks is opportunity. So I like
And
this.
seasoning.
It's a little bit. He doesn't need much. I mean, they're heavyweights. Their power their size, if they've got the ring generalship and they have the other basic skills and they're defensively responsible, they can do a lot of harm to somebody. And I mean, he just has all the tools, all the charisma. He's supremely confident without being overly cocky. He rides that line really nicely. And he has passed every single test put in front of him. I think he has. I'm gonna check this while I've got my box rec up, but his record, I think he has only made it to the past the fourth round once. He's 12-0, 10 knockouts. In his last three fights, knockout round two, knockout round one, knockout round two, against admittedly a faded, but at one time very accomplished Marius Vach. Going back, knockout round two, round one, round one, round one. He did go 6 rounds with a fighter 2 years ago, back to back. Actually, it looks like 2 6-round fights. He went to decision both ways. It was a blowout, 60-54 on all three cards in both those fights. There hasn't been a fighter who's either lasted or won a single round against him so far. He has an interesting background. He is actually a native of Slovakia, moved to the United Kingdom, moved to Kent, England as a very young kid. So he's grown up in Great Britain. And I mean, he is the kind of star the sport needs. There are a lot of bets being put on him. And I think this fight with Dillian Whyte, Whyte has sort of become a gatekeeper. A lot of folks would say, should Dillian Whyte really be fighting anymore? I'm one of those people that would really have liked to see Whyte retire, but he's still wildly popular in England. The old warhorse brings it, and he can punch. Whyte could, if he could land the right punch, and catch Itama, he can bring him down. That's what drives the interest in watching this matchup. And it is a step-up fight for Itama at this point of his career. No matter how talented we think he is, he's going to need to prove it along the way. And he's just not going to get that opportunity at the belts until Usyk and Dubois finish their business. So smart for him to stay busy in front of the public. God knows he isn't exactly killing himself in all these fights. He's only going 1 or 2 rounds.
Absolutely, and to boot, Gail, the thing, not only just the obvious skill and physical ability, he's doing this as a southpaw, something that you rarely see in the
Yes,
heavyweight
very good
division.
point. Yes, very glad you brought that up. Yeah, that is a handicap for a heavyweight.
Absolutely.
It's not slowing him down, and he is currently the WBO intercontinental, regional belt holder. But it is the WBO which gets the first mandatory. I would need to check and see who the mandatory challenger would be for the winner of Usyk Dubois. But the other question is, should Usyk win, is he going to retire? And I do think that's a possibility, which means all the belts would be in play, which would make the heavyweight division very, very interesting.
And if that happens just on sheer talent alone, and I think the lack of depth in the heavyweight division, you could conceivably see Atuma's promoter Warren put him in position him to fight for a world title, and I could see Atuma winning a vacant world title right now.
Yeah, he could. So the mandatory is Joseph Parker. I can't believe that slipped my mind. So let's say that Usyk unifies again, decides he's done, and we end up with that vacant belt available, and we get a fight between Parker and Itama. I love it.
Indeed. So at the very least, Itama is on the come up again. He's going to fight August 16th against Dillian White in Saudi Arabia. I think Daniel may have is having some technical issues. We'll try to get to him again. Um, oh, he's back. He's back now. Let's switch to Canelo and Crawford. We now have a date, September 13th, locale, Las Vegas. I'll go to both of you. Has there have you heard any word about a possible venue for this bout? You got multiple in Las Vegas. You could put it in the MGM Grand, right? You could put it outdoors if they want, where the uh, Raiders play. Also, who is going to be the official promoter of record for this event?
So it's Sella, which is the Saudi promotional arm of the General Entertainment Authority. So Sella is the promoter of record. However, TKO, Dana White's organization, is also a co-promoter.
Mm-hmm.
Dana will do all the heavy lifting, and that is established. The venue is not. They want Allegiant Stadium. And originally, the venue at the stadium was booked for Friday the 12th. Canelo does not want a Friday night fight, and he's right. His fans, need to travel. They need to get there. It's not a night that will maximize turnout. He wants it on Saturday. He's adamant about that. Unfortunately, Allegiant Stadium is currently booked that Saturday. University of Nevada, Las Vegas also plays their games at Allegiant Stadium. They have a home game versus Idaho State, by the way. So the question is, can they move them? Netflix is airing the fight. Netflix is available for regular subscribers. It will not be a pay-per-view. All you need is your regular monthly Netflix subscription. If Netflix and Turkey and the Saudis want to pay UNLV to move, they can do it with ease. That's what everyone thinks is going to happen, because this is a fight that could certainly sell a lot more tickets than the biggest indoor venue in Las Vegas, which is the T-Mobile Arena at 23,000 and change. They want to put it somewhere. Canelo's the biggest draw in boxing. Say what you will about Jake Paul and whoever else is out there. Canelo already set the stadium record for an indoor fight in the United States when he fought Billy Joe Saunders at AT&T. They know that he can put, at the very least, I'm sure he could put 45,000 people's butts in those seats, right? Can he sell it out? Who knows? But 40,000 is a whole lot more than 25,000. And that, especially in Las Vegas, where there are so many other ways to generate revenue, would be a massive gate. Massive. They don't need to worry about pay-per-view money. Not that the Saudis give a damn about making a profit. That is not why they're in boxing. But Dana White might. So we'll see what happens. I predict they move UNLV.
No matter how powerful Dana White thinks he is, Turkey al Sheikh and the Saudis, they override anything that he does.
They do, but having crossed paths with that operation when the Saudis promoted the Crawford Madrimov fight in BMO Stadium in Los Angeles last summer, it was rough going. They're not used to doing that kind of business or the logistics of promotion here in the United States. They don't have a handle on it. They don't have any experience. So fair enough. Dana does. So they need Dana. I also need his promotional know-how in the United States. And this is Dana's chance to prove his worth. So there were a lot of moving parts to this. And we haven't even gotten to talk about the fight. So they're going to have to straighten out these logistics. But listen, I cannot imagine that a public university like UNLV and a public university like Idaho State wouldn't be interested in some kind of monetary consideration to move the venue, move the date, switch the game from a home game in Las Vegas to a home game in Idaho. Who knows? I think they will come to some kind of arrangement. I mean, the default would be T-Mobile. I mean, maybe that happens, but I think they're going to do whatever they can to get into Allegiant Stadium.
What say you, Daniel? And you can follow up, Gail. What say you about this fight ending up on Netflix? Because I know the last couple of boxing events on Netflix, uh, let's just say people were not happy when it comes to real access to watch the fight in full with glitching and whatnot. We all remember whatever you think about that fight, whatever I think about the fight quote unquote between Paul and Tyson. There were a whole lot of people who were mad because of glitching issues
Mhm.
throughout that event.
Well, a lot of that worry has been subsided, mainly by the way that Netflix has handled the streaming of Monday Night Raw over the last since January. They've done a pretty good job. There hasn't been that many hiccups when it comes to the streams in that area. So it looks like they figured out those kinks. But the main thing that has to be followed is the venue, and the other factor that have to play into this, and this is a key part of TKO being involved in the promotion of this event. Las Vegas, the city of Las Vegas, actually made a move and usurped New Orleans because this year they had WrestleMania. Again, WWE's owned by TKO. And they basically stole WrestleMania 42 from New Orleans. So next year, WrestleMania is going to be back again in Las Vegas. So you have that relationship already between the city of Las Vegas and TKO. You add that, the blood money, and they're going to find a way. That'll be moved if Canelo makes it adamant that he wants Allegiant Stadium. If that happens, it will be moved. But I'm not so much worried about the logistics of Netflix streaming the fight now because they've done a pretty good job when do when having a steady stream like Monday Night Raw. And I'm pretty sure most of that production team is going to be playing the factor for this fight too. What's going to be interesting is going to be watching Dana White again be put in the position of being an actual boxing promoter in a situation where he is not fully in control. We saw how he handled it with Mayweather McGregor. And in this situation, everybody knows he's not the one in charge. So it's going to be interesting to see how Dana White feels it. But it is a smart move for them to do this, not be a pay-per-view. Because one of the big complaints about when it comes to Canelo's fights recently has always been it's still a pay-per-view, the price is too high, and the caliber opponent recently, like obviously last fight with Skull, didn't warrant the pay-per-view price. And as much as Bud is going to be a decent fight, it's smart for them to do this.
Translation from a business perspective, this makes sense. What Daniel is asking is, given Dana White's ego, how will he handle not being primary, not being censored, right? Has to play second, maybe even third, second fiddle, secondary, maybe even tertiary. How will he deal? How will he cope? Uh, we will see. Um, if he's smart as he thinks he is, he will just, to quote The Rock, know your role. Will he do that? We will see. You know, he should. Personally, I'm not one to never fully trust him. I have my reasons for that, but it would behoove him to not make any kind of rumblings before, during, and after this thing, and do what he have to do if he wants to be a promoter, if he wants to make a serious run as a promoter, particularly in the era of Turkey, Alex Sheik, who has a clear foothold on the sport right now. Let's move on to preview some fights here. Main card, I want to talk about Gail happens in NYC on DAZN. Bit of a homecoming here for IBF 140-pound champion Richardson Hitchins fighting George Kambosos, who we all remember for his win over Teofimo Lopez a few years back. Lost twice to Devin Haney. He's campaigning at 140 pounds now. On balance, Gail, Hitchins is taller. Hitchins is longer. I think he's more skilled than Kambosos. He has the advantage from a physical standpoint, but Kambosos has the experience. The problem is, Gail, I don't know if he's a good enough. He's not a good enough boxer where I could think he can outbox Hitchins, and I don't think he has the power. Hell, he wasn't a power puncher at 135. He wasn't hurting outside of that moment when he put Teofimo down. He wasn't exactly knocking down or hurting prime competition at lightweight. I don't see a reason why he can do that at 140. His only chance is to sucker and trick and use guile to frustrate Hitchins. But if Hitchins stays calm and composed and use that jab, which can be outstanding when he utilizes it to its fullest extent, Hitchins should win and win by fairly comfortable margin and just outbox Kambosos. That's all what he needs to do.
That's all he needs to do. Yeah, absolutely. He has no reason to get in a firefight with Kambosos. Now, that's what Kambosos will try to do. And Kambosos has done a really good job this week in pre-fight activities, needling Hitchins. He has gotten under his skin a little bit, accusing him of being a runner, that he's going to, just run from him all night. And given the baggage we now have, looking back at those horrible Times Square fights, followed by the horrible Canelo and Skull fight,
y'all better be glad I was off during that time because, that was a fiasco.
God, Inoue, Cardenas,
Talk
Espinosa
about saving the
saved
weekend.
the weekend. Yeah, all those bangers. And we had a good time in Las Vegas. But to the point, there is a lot of stink around defensive mobile fighters right now. If you notice, there have been comments this week from Turkey Al-Sheikh, the money man, promising that to the fans, he will not book duckers, runners for Riyadh season cards, that he will no longer book any fighter who operates that way. Well, what does that mean exactly? What qualifies? If you're a defensive mobile fighter, are you caught up in this discussion? And Hitchins could be considered one of them because he is skilled. He boxes really well. He's a hit and not get hit kind of guy. He knows exactly what to do to win on the cards. And he has said openly in interviews that I've heard with several organizations that, he doesn't really give a damn what the fans think. He doesn't care if he stinks it out. He does what he needs to do to win. Right now, that's a recipe for some perception problems among the fans. Be that as it may, you still need to win. And as long as he stays disciplined and knows what to do, he should win this fight. What happens to him after this, that is a completely different discussion, but we need to get past Saturday. Kambosos is a genius. Why do I say that? He's parlayed one really terrific upset performance into an entire career, and he has made a lot of money doing it. His value as an opponent is that he's faced a lot of top names. He's never been completely blown out. He's certainly lost, but he's competitive. And one thing you can say about Kambosos, he brings it, he gives his all, he knows how to sell a fight. He's got a lot of fans who love him, kind of in the same way they like all action banger kind of guys that, don't necessarily have a pristine record, but they're always entertaining. He's not quite as rough around the edges, crazy as, say, a Brandon Rios, and he's not a mythic figure like an Arturo Gatti, but it's that school of boxing. And God bless him. He's made his money. He's back again. And we can always count on him to bring some entertainment value, especially during the week. He's gotten into it with Hitchins. He's provoked him a little bit. He's classy about it. He's, not insulting family or getting too dirty, but he's gotten right up in Hitchins' face. And, it's made for a little bit of a good buildup to get fans interested in this fight. They're at the theater at Madison Square Garden, good venue. And that's where Kambosos had his big win, right? So he's very comfortable there. It'll be fun to watch, but certainly Hitchins and the odds makers agree is the favorite.
Earlier, we talked about Abdullah Mason and Keyshawn Davis and fighters at 135 pounds. Right, Daniel? Another guy in that division uh, is someone who beat Davis multiple times in the amateurs. Um, Someone I think uh, would beat him again in the pros, and that is one um, Andy Cruz, who fights a Japanese fighter by the name of Mishiro on the undercard of Hitchins and Kambosos. Now, throughout the week, Cruz has not shied away from taking his verbal shots at Davis. Um, I think he wins this fight. I believe he wins this fight against Mishiro. The question is, earlier we asked about Abdullah Mason and Raymond Muratala vis-a-vis the world lightweight landscape. Andy Cruz should be mentioned in that as well. Uh,
Yes, he should.
if Mason is on the verge of a title shot and Muratala has been recently named full-time champion at 135, the question is, when will we see Cruz and specifically Matchroom, his promoter, put him in that world scene vis-a-vis the champions in that division?
Well, given the timing of Murataya being elevated and obviously Abdullah Mason having that exemplary performance last week, it should be now. This should be the coming out party. Because at that point, because I think he'll beat Nishida too, he has enough of a skill set to make it a very tactical and a very defensive minded fight in a lot of ways. But I think this would be the fight where you put him in that stage because now the players are now in place. Murataya is now an official champion. Abdullah Mason now is on the verge of challenging. So if you're Matchroom, you need to do this now because lightweight is looking to pick up, and it's looking to pick up pretty fast. And you don't want to be seen as a promoter who left this fighter left behind.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was distracted for a bit, and I think we're going to end things on that note. Looking right here, Just doing a quick rundown, see if there's anything else interesting. Yeah, no Nonito Donaire. He's fighting, but he's fighting in Argentina against a guy we really
He
have
is a
not.
maniac. He is a
Yeah,
maniac.
I get it. Fighting Andres Campos, but
Oh, poor
why?
Paul.
Why? That's my only question.
You
Why is
know,
he continuing to fight?
he was very involved in Inoue Fight Week in Vegas, and I mean everybody asked him about it, and he and Chris Algieri were working the fight for Top Rank, and I mean he's laughing at himself, but I mean he's just still very driven, believes he has a talent, and God bless you, Nonito, go for it. Just God, don't get hurt, please.
Yeah, but we know what he's made it a goal, unfortunately, to be on the undercard of Manny's fight. So
Yeah, well, I have thoughts about that too, but we'll get into it in a future show, I'm sure.
Yeah, because just no. Why is that fight happening between Manny and Barrios? It's just no one wins. Whoever wins. Um, if Barrios blows him out, the question will be he did it. The response would be he did it against a 46-year-old Manny Pacquiao. I know Pacquiao is up there showing videos of him running up the hills and shadow boxing, but it's clear to see, in my opinion, that he doesn't have the speed that he once has. And if Manny somehow pulls this off, oh my gosh, the criticism of Barrios coming off of his last Barrios last fight, which he did not look good. So again, it's just no winner in this. Why have this fight happen? You know, Barrios should be fighting someone like Conor Ben, but again, Gail, that's a discussion for another day. And I think we're going to shut things down on that note. Begin the show. If you are checking us out on YouTube, please make sure to hit that like button. Please make sure to hit that subscribe button. To do so, you will get notifications on all future episodes. We usually go with ladies first. We end with ladies first. That is the case again this evening. So as we shut things down, I'll go back to you, Gail, of nyfights.com for anybody who want to talk anything boxing. Let the folks know where they can find you.
It's nyfights.com. We are under new ownership, roaring right along. It's all good. You can also find me on socials. Trust me, there's only one Gail Falkenthal, and I am on all platforms except for Facebook. Don't look for me there.
Oh, okay. Because yeah, we'll talk about this, but I did see your name pop up there, so that may be a fake account. Just letting you know that offhand, Gail. I'll go to you, Daniel, for Boxing News and the Inscriber for those who want to talk. The Sweet Science for those who want to talk. Pro Wrestling for those who want to talk the NBA. Especially when it comes to the Miami Heat, and we're recording this live right now as Game 3 of the NBA Finals are happening between Oklahoma City and Indiana. Again, for those who want to talk boxing, wrestling, pro wrestling, um, Miami Heat, let the folks know where they can hit you up.
yes, folks, you see it on the tab. It's RAWKUZ99. It's gonna be on all socials. I'm still on I'm still on Twitter because you gotta keep up with the madness that is happening. There's on Blue Sky, Threads, IG, still same on there. Definitely catching up on there because hopefully we're getting things picking up fairly soon in all aspects of the sport because not only is the NBA Finals happening, but tomorrow is also game 4 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And if there are any indication from game 3, it is not going to be a fun night if you are a Canadian.
Yeah, because coming off of Game 2, in which the Panthers thrashed the Edmonton Oilers 6-1, and it wasn't even that close. It wasn't even close to the score indicated, right? That was a beat down. Yeah, the Panthers are on alert right now to show something in Game 4. Because if they don't, this series is going to be pretty much a gentleman's sweep in favor of the Panthers, in my opinion. For those who want to talk boxing, music, business, boxing, music, fitness, and maybe colognes, because I do dabble with the cologne talk on Blue Sky. Otherwise, you can check me out on Twitter because I refuse to call it X. Brother JR at Brother JR76. You can check me out on IG, Brother JRSC, Blue Sky, Brother JR76, and I'm also on TikTok, Brother JR SC, Brother JR on TikTok as well. On a future episode, we will do a recap of Richardson Hitchins defending the IBF 140-pound strap against former unified lightweight champion George Kambosos. Andy Cruz fighting Hironori Mishiro. Um, we may talk about Donaire, probably not. And we will also preview Vito Melanecki, who's returning to the ring on June 21st, Newark, New Jersey, on ESPN Plus. We may talk Galal Yafai, who's also fighting on that same day over in England. On the zone, as well as he's fighting for defending his interim flyweight belt. So not much to talk about in terms of in the ring action, significant bouts and whatnot. But we'll find something to chop it up as we try to get back into rotation here on when it comes to these boxing streets because taking time off. Outside of in a way, let's just say it wasn't much too thrilling that happened. And overall, boxing in 2025 has been, as I said earlier in the beginning of the show, pretty doggone mid. Let's hope it picks up um, as we head into the summer and in the last half of 2025. So again, for Gil of nyfights.com, from Daniel and for Boxing News and the Inscriber, I'm your host, Michael. This has been episode 468 of the Pound for Pound Box Report. We will see you guys next time. Everyone have a good evening. Good night.